Hello, I'm Killian Quigley, a postdoctoral researcher at the Sydney Environment Institute here at the University of Sydney. To start, I'd like to acknowledge and pay respect to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional owners and custodians of the land where the University of Sydney stands and where I'm talking to you now. Today's conversation is one in a series highlighting interdisciplinary collaboration. Here, I'm talking with my colleagues Jude Philp and Leah Lui-Chivizhe, whose work spans curation, history, material culture, Indigenous knowledges, and a great deal more. We talk about the importance of openness, advocacy, place, and so forth. Thank you for being with us. Enjoy.
My name's Leah Lui-Chivizhe. I am a postdoc in history at the moment, and my work has mostly been in Torres Strait history and Torres Strait cultural objects, particularly works of turtle shell.
My name's Jude. I work at the Chau Chak Wing Museum as a curator for the Macleay Collections, which include natural history, scientific objects, things from the Pacific, from Australia, and historic photography. And in my disciplinary background, I'm an anthropologist who's worked in the Torres Strait and New Guinea on material culture things.
So to get started, Leah, I'm aware that you and Jude have worked together on multiple and varied projects over the course of a few years. From your perspective, what brought your paths together in the first place?
Wow. Place. Place brought us together, and the place that is the place where my family is from, the Torres Strait. So I got to know Jude maybe the mid-2000s when I was working with the Curation Centre and worked with Jude on some Torres Strait material that is in the Macleay Museum.
The other thing that was really exciting was meeting someone who was interested in working on Torres Strait's cultural magnificence, which the museum is very privileged to have in its collection, and to have someone who we could work with in a rounder way with that collection beyond trying to foster relationships with a very distant, remote community, which is possible and which is fantastic, but it's limited. You can travel for 2 weeks at a time, or you can go for a month or a year, but then you come back and that distance remains. So yeah, place is the thing that really made that relationship more solid than it might be with other people who I meet.
The other really important thing for me has been how, first of all, knowing that there is this material at this institution, but then telling other islanders who live in Sydney about the material, and we'd put out some material that was from the Eastern Torres Strait, and to have community people come in and look at the material and recall stories that they were told about the material was a really, I guess it's one of the difficult things about working with collections is how to connect the things you have to people to make those things seem less like just things. Yeah. So that's one of the nice outcomes for me working with Jude, is being able to bring in Torres Strait people.
So it sounds a little bit like maybe you're saying, Leah, that sometimes, or ideally, collaboration involves a kind of community building or a kind of networking and bringing others in. Does that sound?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
And I think for me, working with Jude on this material, it's not just about the material. It's a much bigger. The material is part of a network. Our collaboration has grown to include, well, we're quite good friends now, and probably one of the nicest things was doing a trip to Murray Island together. And having Jude as my doctoral supervisor. Kind of grew out of our collaboration. Working with Jude over the years has really kind of shaped, I suppose, my process for working with material, but also for bringing community people into our collaborative space.
Being able to have that connection to community with a trusted person, because one of the things that comes with collections of museum material, particularly from the 19th century and from the kinds of histories that our collection comes from, which is common, is a great distrust of both curators, rightly, and of how this material is cared for and known. So you can't just cold call, oh look, we've got all this stuff, come and look. It's not how those things should happen anyway. And it takes a long time to build that trust with people to feel comfortable enough to come and look at material, to know that it's safe for them to do that, because there are things in many museum collections that which aren't safe objects or safe things for certain people, whether it's male, female, age, knowledge, mainland, island, whatever it happens to be. We rely on communities to let us know that, because that's not a constant. Things change in people's worlds all the time. And so we really do rely on close companions of the museum, if you like, who are there as conduits for people's worries, for their concerns and their access to be able to see, learn from and understand what their ancestors were doing with that kind of cultural material. But one of the things I think that has, for me, defined how our collaboration has sort of gone forwards is moving from that traditional path of the objects that people make to the things that animate those objects, the philosophies behind them, the ways that they interlink with other kinds of parts of people's worlds, in this case, the world of turtles.
That's fantastic. Thanks very much, Jude. There are so many, I think, important issues that are implicit in what you're saying. One of them I wonder if we might come back to for a second, thinking about trust and thinking about respect, and also thinking about sort of power and power relations, whether we're talking about power relations among different disciplines or among different professional practices or among career levels, let's say, right? The relationship between a PhD student and a PhD supervisor, for example, right?
In becoming a supervisor as such, I don't feel like it doesn't feel to me like it needs to be or should be a position of power. It has a certain amount of responsibility that one needs to take immensely seriously, because this is someone else's life that you're working with. And there are duties that you need to do to fulfil administrative roles. Then that's where the power bits go. They go into making sure that the university understands that this thing needs to happen and that it should be supported and moved through. But in working with you as you went through your PhD, it was much more a really exciting thing of just seeing and having the privilege of seeing another person's ideas go to their end point, to see this real ferment and fruition of 3 years of really dedicated thinking and hard thinking and writing about a subject, which is the PhD. But just to be able to be there as a sounding board, that it's just such a fantastic thing to be able to do with someone, and a privilege in that role, that I don't feel like it's a superior position. And learnt, it's also really interesting as a supervisor to have to move yourself back from what is your discipline. I had been given a training, if you like, in that supervising relationship of being able to stand back, see this as a discrete thing that is theirs entirely, not swamp it with ideas that need to be pushed through from your own kinds of ideas, but to sort of to be able to think about, well, where are those separations between the ways that I write and think about stuff and the way that you write and think about stuff when we're writing about similar kinds of things.
And it's the importance of the relationship, and whether or not, and one of the things I've said to students who've come to me to be supervised is you talk to a few different people and work out who you think you can work with on the basis of, if you've got stuff that is really troubling you, whether it's home life stuff that's going to get in the way of you getting the work done, or ideas, have a think about whether you could talk to that person about that stuff, because it's the stuff that will take away your time.
That's really useful. And I think it's also really useful, Jude, the way that you sort of reframed my question around power toward sort of advocacy, as opposed to thinking about power relations as something that are always expressed kind of negatively, as it were. Before we come to a close, I'd love to hear a little bit more, perhaps from both of you, about something you raised earlier, Leah, which is disagreement or dissent.
Gosh, I think for me, disagreements are the spaces where other things become possible. Disagreements actually create space, and I think it can push us into finding other ways of dealing with something or responding to something or reorient the way we think of a problem.
I've got another collaborator who I've worked with for 10 years, and we really do feed off disagreement as a way of sorting out argument, like to a point that some of our other collaborators on projects don't want to be in the same room as we're disagreeing with each other, because it sounds like we're being personal, but we're not. We're just really trying to get to the bottom of that through that negative space of testing. Well, what's the end point that you can get to with this argument if you really pushed it that far? Okay, that's where its limits are. Now let's move it this way. So I do have collaborators where that's part of the way that we work, but I don't think that's been part of how we've worked together. And I think it's partly different goals that we're trying to work on. Timing is our great problem. Timing is the great problem of being able to see a project we really want to do, and there's one that we're in the midst of doing at the moment, that other things keep on getting in the way, and that's I think one of the real benefits of having a really strong collaborative partnership, is that you can leave off that idea for however long. It's ticking away, both people are ticking away at it, and they're putting things aside, and we've still got that thing happening there sometime, and we'll just keep on working until we can get there. So there's a commitment that comes with that collaboration of we've got a project, we're going to see it through.
Yes. And I think we both have a sense that things have their own time as well, you know, that this will come together.
It doesn't matter that it didn't work last year, of course.
Yeah, that it will come together, because that's where everything we're doing is putting in place for it to head towards something that will be the product. I guess it's the organic way that our collaboration has grown that is what I've enjoyed, that it's not been a forced, we're going to do this and we're going to get it done by now. It's like, we're going to do this over the next few years.
And how wonderful to have a feeling of confidence in the mutual sort of commitments in the collaborative relationship. Thanks for sharing so kind of expansively and openly about this admirable and frankly enviable relationship that you've been talking about. I think it's been incredibly productive and informative. So really, thank you, Leah, and thank you.
Thank you.
Jude.
Thanks, Killian.
It's fun.
Thanks, Jude.
It's nice to talk.
Yes.
It really has been. And thanks again for watching. On behalf of my colleagues here and all my colleagues at the Sydney Environment Institute, thanks very much for your time, and take care.